These past 48 hours, this last week or month or so since the GTA Trilogy was announced, it's been quite something. There was a lot of excitement behind this definitive edition because these are beloved games, San Andreas, Vice City, and GTA 3, many of which coming from, I guess you could say, a lot of people's childhoods, including my own. I loved these games back then and I still love them now. I think the big issue I'm having with this remaster is the fact that just how Rockstar Games has gone about all of this. And I'm going to be touching on multiple factors throughout this video, but I've been playing this trilogy, I've been going through all three games, and it really just it sucks. It sucks that these games didn't get the love that they deserve. I think the easy thing to say is that these games needed more love given to them. They needed more time in the oven. I think that's what I've been hearing. I saw another video that said something like that, and I completely agree. That seems to be the general consensus, is that these were rushed out. I don't know how long the development of this remaster was, but there's just so many issues. And a lot of these issues were from these original games, which is just shocking why they didn't touch any of this up. Like, a lot of the controls in GTA 3, just for instance, they feel very clunky, like the driving. I've never been a fan of it. And then there's all kinds of bugs and glitches that were originated back in the day, and they're still here. And then you could talk about the AI, you could talk about the gameplay. It's just, I don't really understand why Rockstar didn't decide to do a little bit more. And especially when this is being offered at $60. That's one of my big issues with this. And also, I mean, you can't play the original games anymore. They've been delisted. Obviously, if you bought it already, I think you still have ownership of it, but they're no longer on any of these digital stores, which sucks because a lot of these games had years and years of mods and they were perfected. Now that's all been wiped out. And remember, the Rockstar and Take-Two lawyers have not slowed down. They are continuing to go after mods, which all of this just, it's completely disappointing. I think we need to separate a few things, because you can be disappointed with this port and also still love these games, and I certainly do. There's still a charm to playing them right now, nostalgia, I guess that's what you could say. But I think that's one of the big things that Rockstar tried selling everybody on, nostalgia. Like, look at these great games, you played them all back then, and they didn't even show any gameplay before delisting the original ones from these digital stores, and I don't even think they showed any gameplay before these launched. And now I'm seeing that the PC launcher is for Rockstar has just been completely broken over the past 24 hours, which for a game launch, that's just disastrous news. And I know a lot of PC players who are absolutely pissed about this. I've been playing this trilogy on the PS5, and I've been running into a lot of issues that I don't think I ever expected, such as constant FPS drops, the rain effects that I thought looked really cool in some of the images and stuff before this was launched look a lot worse than I had expected. And as I explained before, the controls for various gameplay elements just feel very clunky, janky, I guess that's the best way to describe it, and that's how it was back in the day, which is just, my point is, not enough was done with this trilogy remaster to warrant the price of $60. Well, I think it would have been better if it was offered at $40 and the originals were still there. But again, Rockstar Take-Two's, their connection with the community has just never been there, which is extremely disappointing, because this remaster could have been done a lot better and there could have been a lot better communication. But I see some comparisons being made to how Rockstar went about this to Cyberpunk 2077. I'm not sure if that's warranted, but there is some similarities with the fact that there was just a lack of gameplay, and while there wasn't any hype like through the moon like Cyberpunk, there's just some really bad lessons that aren't being learned. I'd love that publishers communicate better with the community or their customers, which is what they view us as, and better understand that ports like this just aren't acceptable in 2021. I said this in my last video near the end, but this is going to sell no matter what. It's probably sold millions already of copies, but this is not up to what it should have been. And I've seen this, I talked about this before also, I've seen the comparisons made to Mafia Definitive Edition, which that was a full remake. That's not what I wanted from this. It's just that this probably should have been touched up a lot better. It should have been given more time in the oven, and there should have been some big overhauls made to some of the gameplay systems that just have not aged well. And then we can talk about the character models. I've been putting this off for a little bit, but yeah, they look rough. There's been various Twitter threads, Reddit threads all over the place talking about this, but when characters look like they go from this to that, I don't know how somebody thought that this was okay. This is as bad as it gets in terms of character models. They look hideous, and all of the detail is just gone. And it's not just with a couple of these characters, it's a lot of them. And in these scenes, I guess it just hasn't aged well. If we're talking about this 15 years ago, I think it was like, yeah, this looks fine, it looks great, but I'm like, it's great that all these blurry textures aren't blurry anymore, but these character models gotta be the worst thing about this remaster in all 3 games. And then there's just many examples that could go on. This specific Twitter thread that I have right here is just a good example of that, showing Tommy's fingernails, and then we see Mafia City guy. It's just all of the detail on their bodies just look so bad. They're gone. And we could go on, I could really keep on going over images upon images, just showing all of the detail that is gone and how hideous some of these characters are, but I really just think you get the point. My chair keeps creaking a little bit in the background. Hopefully you guys don't hear it, but yeah, I mean, there are some good things about this remaster that I need to bring up, such as the fact that the radio and weapon wheels, they look great. That's a nice new addition. It's just, I wish we had seen more of that. I think the lighting effects for the most part look pretty good, but most of all, what I can really point to that is the good part of this remaster, it's the environments. It's not just the textures. The mall in Vice City has been upgraded. I think CJ's house has also been upgraded. Like, it's not just they upgraded some of the textures, they added extra detail. That's what I really liked about it. And it's just, I wish we had seen more of that. And it's not just, I don't want to see the environments upgraded. I wanted some of the gameplay overhauled. Specifically the AI, which is dumb as rocks, and especially GTA 3. And I mean, they have these systems working in, you know, these newer games, but I just wish that they had give it a little bit more with this remaster, especially when we're paying $60. And I understand that this isn't a remake. That's what a lot of people are going to be bringing up. Well, that's what's connected to a remake. But when I'm paying $60 for this, which I guess you could say it's $20 per, but it's all put in one package, I just feel like it's unacceptable. Now, I know some or maybe all of you are wondering, what does Rockstar Games make of the mixed reaction that they're getting with this definitive edition? And I really think it is that they're not surprised, because it seems like a lot of this was supposedly creative decisions that they made. And I actually want to go to a USA Today interview that a Rockstar Games producer on this project had just the other day, in which he explained and defended a lot of the decisions that they made with this definitive edition. So first off, this Rockstar Games producer explains their decision to actually remaster this. He says why they did it was because it's a way to maintain the titles for the next decade plus without having to rip out hair every time there's a crash bug that we have problems fixing because there are some terrible old tools. So it was a case of dealing with the real-world dilemma of digital marketplaces and the fact that they're slowly replacing our physical market. There was a very nervous caveat to it all, which was don't change the feel. For years, HD remakes became in vogue, and you started seeing remakes popping up for all these old games. We resisted that for a very long time for that same reason. If you're going to revisit these titles, you have to make sure it's done with a certain amount of TLC. And he furthermore continues explaining that people love these games like they love them. To go back to something like that after 20 years, it's a little bit nerve-wracking because you have to make sure that people's expectations are met. When we released the trailer, you see folks projecting how they felt it should have been. You put these things out understanding you're not going to please everybody. When you're playing with somebody's childhood, you've got to be very, very careful. And I somewhat understand what he's saying here, but I just think that when you look at some of the comparison photos, maybe it's just my personal perspective, but I don't think it looks very good, and it stands out compared to the old games, which you see these characters' faces, which obviously they don't look all that great, but they have more detail than what they do now, which, I mean, it stands out. That's what that's the best way I can describe it, and it stands out for bad reasons. And it sucks that the original games now are no longer available, and now we just have all these comparison photos, people saying, like, what happened here? Now, this Rockstar Games producer continued to explain some of the more decisions that they made with this remaster. He says, now, if you take a closer look at CJ's house on Grove Street, and you might also recognize some of the decor littered around. Some items here originated in Grand Theft Auto 5 too. So this is just an example of, yes, Rockstar Games did carry over some of the assets that they made for GTA 5 to this this remaster, which makes you wonder, why couldn't we have done it a little bit more? Why couldn't we do some of the AI and some of the technology that is improved? And this Rockstar Games producer's argument seems to be that they didn't want to mess with the feel. He says, the same is true for a lot of the surrounding areas like the barber shops, where we also lifted assets. If we need a new refrigerator, why make a new one? Have a perfectly good one right here. It was done in a way that hopefully that unless I told you that was a refrigerator from GTA 5, you wouldn't even notice it because it blends into the background. Now this USA Today article continues saying for the existing assets, Rockstar and Grove Street used an AI program to scale up the textures before going in by hand and tweaking them to make sure they look right. They hate signage and it would screw it up pretty fierce. And you start with a certain selection of textures before realizing that it's creating a mismatch across the map, so you're stuck with having to do all of them. It makes for a better end product, but it was a giant task. You're looking to the tune of well over 100,000 textures. And yeah, we've seen some people taking screenshots of some textures that are misspelled and there's some errors, but I can say that for the most part, the textures in this game look pretty good with this remaster. Now, textures aren't the only place where Rockstar employed the help of AI for these remasters. To give the definitive edition less friction for the modern audience, the developers wanted to add a GPS to the game's minimap, which is extremely helpful from what I've played. Choose a mission, the map will draw out lines on the road, leading you to your destination, which works most of the time. It's a feature most modern open world games have, but it wasn't present in these original releases. The GPS is based on the AI pathfinding and the routes NPCs take as they drive and walk around these virtual cities. And again, just gonna emphasize why couldn't we do more of that, especially with how NPCs or driving works. And again, I think the argument that they would make is because they want to capture that feel and maintain it. Now, a very key part of this interview that I really wanted to touch on was this. While there are a bunch of quality of life changes, character tweaks, cube mapped windows, and all the other changes covered here, Rockstar was focused on looking back and protecting the legacy of these games. The developers' hopes to retain the essence of what those games were at launch, like capturing a snapshot in time, is viewed through rose-tinted glasses. We've all played various remakes and remasters where you pick up the controller and immediately something just feels off. One big tenet that we had was to maintain as much as the original art style and feel as humanly possible. So we essentially lifted the physics game code and ported that into Unreal Engine verbatim. If any individual wants to point out this feels different, I will very happily tell them they're wrong because it's the same exact game code. And this is just where I completely disagree, and this is the argument that they're trying to make, but in my opinion, it just comes off as laziness, and I wish Rockstar had been more clear about this, saying that this is pretty much the same exact game code or the same exact game, just with a little bit of a facelift. And in some scenarios, especially the rain effects in GTA 3, it does not look very good in at least some of the scenarios that I've seen. Now, the last part of this interview that I want to touch on is an explanation about these character models. That is the big thing that everybody's talking about and mostly taking an issue with, just because there's a lack of detail in a lot of the faces that were present in the original. And this USA Today article points out that improved controls add to an aging game, which, remember, this remaster did receive some improved controls. Now, whereas messing too much with existing assets would have the opposite effect. Characters in the trilogy were built with cartoonized dimensions, and their motion capture data is tied to those existing wireframe skeletons. Their inhuman proportions are locked, so they have to remain as exaggerated caricatures. If Rockstar were to then dump a bunch of realistic roads and buildings around them, the art styles would clash. It'd be like seeing Homer Simpson in Times Square. I think some people would actually like that. And this Rockstar Games producer says specifically, so there's a balancing act that's also employed where you want to take advantage of modern lighting systems, but you don't want to mess around with the original color palette, and you don't want to mess around with the original art style. So when you're adding geometry to certain characters, you're still maintaining that same look. The big goal here, besides making sure that we future-proof the titles, is it must look like you remember it. Your brain has the habit of just modernizing things ever so slightly, smoothing out certain edges that weren't there before. And I guess, again, this is just another part that I'll disagree, because I don't think that a lot of these character models' original look were, I guess you could say, well captured. They don't look like how they did back then, and it definitely stands out as a negative. And I don't know how modern audiences, people that have never experienced these games, would think about this. That's an interesting question, but as somebody who who did play these in my childhood, yeah, I'm like, this doesn't look very good, Rockstar. I think that there should have been some more work on this, but it definitely sounds like the argument they're making is not that they just screwed up here, it's that they made this decision. This was a creative decision. And from what I'm seeing on social media, it seems like a lot of people did not like that. Now, another twist in this story is that it appears that GTA Trilogy on PC, one of the reasons why it may have been pulled is because data miners discovered that these remasters contain the missing music and the holy grail of dev notes from the original source code, something that Rockstar usually doesn't want anybody seeing. They're very secretive, and looks like somebody accidentally left that in. Now, as of recording this video, we're actually starting to get some reviews from critics and users alike, and it's pretty much the same story. Overwhelmingly negative, a lot of people upset, and I didn't really touch on this throughout the video, but I really do think that not a lot of resources were spent on this remaster. And if I really had to guess, I would say that Rockstar Games probably really didn't work on this, and this was primarily Grove Street Games, which does have a rocky history with remasters in the past. But on Metacritic right now, the critic scores are very low. The highest one is a 70 from jouevideo.com. That's also on the PS5, and on PC, there's no reviews coming in from critics yet, but many users absolutely livid. Right now it has a 0.7 score, 503 negative reviews, only 22 that are positive. Some of the most upvoted user reviews on the website right now is this trilogy and the way Rockstar handles things is mostly pathetic, disgusting things I have ever seen in modern video game history. This is next level bad. Why is the Rockstar launcher still down over a day? Are you kidding me? Yeah, that's just unprecedented. Thanks so much, Rockstar. You made a re-release that is worse than the original games. Wait, you took down mods and the original games? Thank you again. And that's just a lot of people bringing that up. Rockstar just proved that there's absolutely no hope left for the company. All talented people have clearly left Rockstar a long time ago. I thought it was impossible to make a remaster worse than Warcraft 3 Refunded, but Rockstar did it. And these comments go on and on and on. And hey, these are just users, but many critics are pretty much lashing out just as bad. VGC gave the game, or this trilogy remaster, a 40, saying few games have had such a lasting impact on how games were made or have been quite so successful. People who weren't into games played those 3 games. Sadly, if they were to pick them up on Switch now, they'd probably wonder if they were ever good in the first place. Nintendo Live saying that this remaster on Switch delivers 3 of gaming's true greats in a shockingly rough package that manages to suck pretty much all the fun out of Rockstar's stellar crime epics. This is a poor port, a shoddy, stuttery, low-resolution mess full of bugs, glitches, audio problems, and more besides. And that, again, this is just the Nintendo Switch reviews. No PC ones yet, but I imagine it's going to be the same story, really on all of these platforms. Overall, to really summarize my thoughts, from what I'm hearing from Rockstar Games, it sounds like they're making the argument that this was a creative decision, everything that they did here. So a lot of the upgrades that we would have wanted to see, the reason why they have not been included is because they want to maintain the feel. The reason why the character models look like how they do is because of what Rockstar wanted to, I guess, keep. They wanted that feel, the look of the characters to remain, although I personally feel like the characters look quite off, many of them actually. It's really late right now while I'm recording this video, but I just wanted to give my 2 cents on this GTA trilogy. I personally view it as disappointing. I think a lot more work could have been done on this. Rockstar seems to be arguing that this was their intention, everything that they did here, and it sounds like they don't believe that they should have done more. But from the performance issues, the glitches, the bugs, I don't know why the issues back in the day are still here. I don't really understand that one. And I also don't understand, and I brought this up earlier, why these games are having such big performance and stability issues on these new generation of consoles. Like, why am I having such bad FPS drops on the PlayStation 5? This points to Rockstar Games and Grove Street Games, who assist in the development of this, not spending enough time testing and working on this remaster. It feels like it was rushed. They have all these explanations lined up, and I don't really buy them, or I just don't feel like they represent what I'm seeing on the screen. Rockstar Games puts a great emphasis on them wanting this to look great in the decade or so why not spend the extra time to perfect it? And all of this just doesn't look good upon them as a developer and how they've gone all about this, which just leads to my ultimate disappointment with this remaster. Hopefully over time it gets some updates, especially to fix up a lot of the stability, performance issues, maybe some of the glitches and bugs, maybe. But so far, I'm just not impressed with how all of this has gone down. And then there's an avalanche of issues that has happened since launch, especially on PC, which many of the players have not even been able to play it yet because of Rockstar having to take the game off the store for miscellaneous reasons. But yes, what do you think of this GTA Trilogy Remaster? I know a lot of people are loving it, bringing a lot of nostalgia, but as a port, I think that this was poorly done. It looked great on paper. I talked about some of the footage originally. I said that it looked pretty cool, but everything else now, and actually now having the ability to experience it, not very good remaster. Anyway, what do you think about all this? Let me know down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games. And again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos like this. I'll see you later.